So I thank you for coming, and I have a specific reason for this conversation. It is to communicate a thank you to a church that's called Calvary Christian Fellowship in Fort Wayne, Indiana, who have been supporting this mission without really knowing what they were doing. And so we are getting together to explain to them. And I just wanted to say that it's an amazing little church. It's not a big church, and there's nobody rich in it, but they just believe that God has always taught them to put the missionary first.
Mm-hmm.
The missionary need comes up when they're wondering how they're going to meet their budget, and they have recognized it over the years that this is God. We need to bite the bullet, give this, and then he just comes through for them, and they do their projects at home as well. So I just want to say thank you to them. What I want us to do today is describe how we got connected to this project, because I believe that this is a divine connection. These people that we are together on the screen by the divine connection of God.
Mm-hmm.
And so to begin with, I wanted to just kind of tell a little bit of history about how our church, Calvary Temple in those days, got connected to Ruth and Victor Martinez.
Mm-hmm.
This was back in the 80s, and they used to itinerate and come to our church and tell all about the ministry in Monterrey, Mexico, of the Bible College and of the churches. And the whole church fell in love with Ruth and Victor.
Mm-hmm.
And every time Ruth would come to me and say, when are you going to come to Mexico and sing? And I would say to her, I'm praying about it. But I wasn't praying about it because I was afraid. I didn't know any Spanish. I thought I would get sick. I just had no desire, but I just wanted to appear spiritual enough. And so I put her off by saying, I'm praying about it. And she asked me every year. And then one year, in the meantime, I had fallen in love and gotten married to J.R. Miller, who
Mm-hmm.
loved missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
And when Ruth and Victor came back, he said, let's invite them out to dinner, which had never occurred to me to do. And I thought, oh no, they're just going to invite me to Mexico. And so we took them out to dinner, and they invited me. And I heard myself saying, if my husband will go, I will go.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the fall of 91, JR and I went for the first time to Monterrey, and they had translated 4 of my songs to Spanish. And I began to learn to sing in Spanish, and I fell in love. And God delivered me from my fear of Mexico. And I decided to learn to speak Spanish. And my whole life has really been changed so much. And now here we are, 30 years later.
Mm-hmm.
We are both widows. And God has brought us back together in this work. So I want to pass it to Ruth first of all. And Ruth, can you tell about how you got connected to the Widows Project?
Well, the way I got connected to the Widows Project is I became a widow 18 months ago after 48 years of marriage. And for the first 11 months, I was comforting many people, but not receiving any comfort for myself. So I would be comforted in the process of comforting, but not anyone reached out to me during that time. Being in Mexico, people just don't know how to do that. And so I soloed for 11 months. And then my brother Mark, who's a missionary in France, had known Mary Beth and Linda Smith from way back when, and they are now widows, and they are now having a ministry for widows in ministry, missionary widows, pastors' wives, widows. And so I got connected, and I got not only connected, but embraced. Very, 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 very warmly embraced and connected in heart and soul to this lovely group, especially Mary Beth and Linda. But my heart was breaking for Mexico because we've had over 1,500 pastors that have died in the last year, and Nicaragua over 200 pastors. And I was reaching out to all these widows, but I said, we've got to do something a little bit different. And so I asked Mary Beth if it was okay, Linda, if it was okay that we would translate their book and start in January. And so the rest is history. We've been started in January, and today we're at 506 widows that we are attending in one way or another. And that's how I got connected to the Widow Project. And it's just gone way beyond my wildest dreams.
Is it only widows?
No, it's widows and widowers. In fact, when we were going to start our first meeting, I kind of felt uncomfortable, trying to minister to widowed men. And so I asked my brother Mark, who got me involved in this, I said, would you be willing,
Wow.
even though you're not a widower, you're not a widowed man, could you please help us? And he accepted the challenge. And so he's reaching out to 60 widowed men, and we're reaching out to 506 widows.
So Mark, would you tell us about that? And first of all, tell us where you are.
Yeah, I'm in France. I've been here for almost 40 years. I was raised in Mexico as a missionary son, and then started my ministry there quite young, in my teen years. And now my wife and I have been here in France for 40 years. I was aware of different friends of mine in Mexico that were losing their husbands, people that I knew.
Yeah.
And then Ruth Ann called me and said, well, what should we do about the men? She said, I really feel a little bit funny of contacting them and say we want to do something for those that have been widowed. And so I just immediately felt in my heart and my spirit, I said, well, I'll take the commitment. And I hope that I'll be able to raise people's awareness in Mexico. I'll work with it from France, but I'll hope that I'll be able to pick up people's awareness in Mexico, and I'll be able to have helpers there.
Yeah.
And so I understood that God would raise men up once we started the group. And so this last Saturday, for the glory of God, there's 5 men that have committed to taking numbers and calling men. And so that's going to take a lot of the pressure off me, because I've been in touch with all these men at different times by WhatsApp, by phone, and the Lord is restoring. It's amazing. There's 2 pastors, especially in the group, whose wives had died a few years ago, and they just had never been comforted. And since the month of January, God has restored their joy. He's restored their peace. And so it's worth it.
You've seen some people come to salvation through these relationships,
haven't you? I prayed with 2 men particularly, and right now I'm dealing with 3 men who are not saved. And then
some of the people that you are seeing restored are actually ministers, and so
yes, they are pastors. Yeah, they're pastors, and now they in turn are saying, there's one man whose wife died in October, and he started coming. So he told his pastor, whose wife had just died a few weeks ago. And the pastor at first, he just didn't feel, that it was for him. And then when he came, he said, I needed this. So he will not miss one single session.
Wow.
He leads a church of 2,000 people. And he said, now I know how to minister to those that are.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Now listen, this must thrill you, Linda Smith.
It does.
Tell about the book this is the book we're using to do the curriculum for these sessions we now have. Tell about that book, please, Linda.
Mary Beth wrote a book, Growing Stronger, for women who had experienced trauma.
Okay.
And when she became a widow, she thought, this is the biggest trauma ever. I need to rewrite that book for widows. So we rewrote that book. It's Don't Lose Heart, A Widow's Guide to Growing Stronger. And now it's been translated into Spanish and French. And people are telling me everywhere, I bought that book for my friend. People are reaching out, not even knowing how much of God there is in that book. And it's just like we have been a channel that God has chosen to work through. It's an absolute thrill to be part of it.
Amen. And Mary Beth, thank you so much for this incredible book. And tell a little bit about your journey, how you connected with Linda and Roland.
Bob and I were married almost 39 years when he became sick almost 2 years ago now. Well, he was sick 2 years ago now and died in June 2 years ago. At that time, Linda came to the memorial and said, Mary Beth, we're going to be good friends again. And I knew the moment she said that, I could see the Lord was speaking through her. And after Bob died, I really tanked. Some people don't. I did. And I was physically very ill, acutely ill, and I was, just emotionally a wreck. And Linda invited me to stay with her, and she was so gracious. And while I stayed with her, she mentored me in widowhood. And we went through three or four different books on widowhood together that way. But also at that time, I realized there was not that much out there. I was searching for materials for widows. And I remember, Linda, I said to you at that time, there's not that much out there. You showed me what you had in your bookcase, but I was searching for more. And I said, we might have to write one, Little did I know, God was serious about that. I saw Roland at some grief share events and learned about the Widows Project. And then about 7 months into widowhood, I went to a seminar that he was hosting called Widow to Widow, about widows who are further along in the journey, mentoring what we call fresh widows. And so even though it was still fairly early for me, I felt the Lord was leading me to this. And so it really has been a blessing that the organization really ministered to me and then provided me an opportunity to reach out to others with that same kind of comfort.
So now you're reaching out through the Widows Project ministry. So Roland, tell us about that. Tell us how the Lord, you'll have to do it in just the short version, but how did the Widows Project happen?
I was looking for my due according to James. The first chapter, it says, be doers of the word and not hearers only. I began to look at those different people groups of his heart. And there are ministries to the prisons and prisoners. There's ministries to orphans. There's ministries to the poor and those that are needy. But I found very little in the faith community for the widow. And it just seemed like, God, that's it. And so I launched it with that conviction. And so it's interesting that you've brought up that your church, Calvary, is particularly interested in missionaries and missions, because I've been studying in Acts this month. And so my prayer even today was that we would have the boldness and the zeal that the early disciples and apostles had as they shared the word. And they went from, they were told to go from Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and uttermost parts. And that has been my prayer, and God's doing that right before our eyes. Our extension to the uttermost parts into France and right now in Mexico is outperforming where we're at here in the United States.
So this is kind of mind-boggling, really, because the Lord's brought together three or four different branches here, And there's the Widows Project, which you guys are located where?
Everett, Washington.
Okay. And then there's Mark, who's in France.
Where's France? Mm-hmm.
And then there's Ruth, who's in Monterrey, or El Carmen, Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're always scratching our heads thinking, what time did somebody say the meeting was? Because we're all in different time zones. Talk about what we need, what you need.
Well, I see that we need, what we need is a full-time administrator, and God has really blessed us with Ruth Avendaño, because I've known her for 30 plus years. She was my assistant here at the Bible school, but it's a huge responsibility. Let me just explain a little bit how we are trying to take care of 506 widows. We have the Zoom calls on Saturday. So Ruth does all that preparing for the Zoom meeting and sending the links and making sure that everybody goes to the breakout rooms, which is quite a challenge.
And how many
A lot of people-
how many people connect to that Zoom meeting on Saturday?
Well, at the most, we've had 138. But over time, I would say between 150 to 180 over these 10 weeks, 11 weeks have
Mhm.
connected. But it's just then it's all the other part of taking care of the widows, like on a daily basis. So that's the part of the Saturday is one aspect.
Mhm.
Then we have what we call broadcast lists. And that's where we have, every time a widow comes in, I receive them, but then from then on, it's like Ruth is the director of the hospital.
Mm.
If we explain it that way, because
Yeah.
it's like having a nurse and making sure that all the widows are cared for very, very tenderly. And so we have WhatsApp groups, and she supervises the WhatsApp groups, and she receives the information of when somebody makes a call to a widow and listens to her for an hour. Then every Sunday, we have also a grief meeting for children. And Ruth is in charge of that one, which is for children from 2 to, well, now age 15, they've already gone up to.
Hmm.
And then we have on Sunday night, another grief for all losses. And so that's another part that she's very much involved at 8:30 on Sunday night, just keeping it all together as far as the meetings, the facilitators, the assistants, receiving all the forms of people that are signing up,
Yeah.
widows and helpers. We call them like the tutors or the nurses, and then the patients. That's so she's the director of the hospital.
Yes, and so I wanted to just take a moment at this point and describe to the church, like when we're on the Zoom call on Saturday afternoon with the 100 or so people connected to it, we see a screen like this, but we can see 25 boxes, and everybody's in their own house, and they're all connected, but we can only see 25 of them. Then you have to click and look at another page and another page and another. There's 4 pages of these 25 boxes of people. And after we listen to the teaching, then we divide into groups, and Ruth, our assistant, our administrator, it does that, which is very complicated, and she's wonderfully patient. And she divides us into smaller groups, and I facilitate one of the smaller groups, and we go through the questions and the discussion, and we pray so that each person can tell their story, and it's more personal. And so that is maybe helping them to understand how we can do this, even though we're not in person. We're on this Zoom call. Now, I wanted to mention that what we also want to do, we want to be putting together like a manual so that other people can reproduce this type of ministry. And also, it's going to be in English, Spanish, and French by the time we're done.
Right. Mhm.
And so this can really touch the nations.
Yes.
Well, I think we better wrap this up, but
Mhm.
it reminds me of Acts chapter 6, where a dispute arose between widows of different ethnic backgrounds.
Right.
And when the apostles took the time to install by prayer and fasting and anointing people in charge of the widows, out of that came an incredible brother named Stephen, who
Mhm.
was the first martyr, and his martyrdom caused the church to spread all over the world.
Mhm.
And so perhaps we are in that same place today where God is calling us again, once again, to do
Amen.
this.
Dios le bendiga. I love you. Gracias por venir. Nos vemos otra vez, Irma. Te quiero, Nuria.
Amalia, mi tocaya, Amalia Martínez. Hola, tocaya.
Gracias, doctora Amalia.
Nos vemos.
Bendiciones.
Thank you, Mary Beth.